Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the Monroe County Election Board meeting on October 24th, County Clerk Nicole Brown gave a quick update on this season's early voting turnout.
That as of today, more than 15,000 people have chosen to participate in early voting and cast their ballot down at election operations. I also called the Secretary of State's office this morning, and more than 500,000 people have chosen to vote early during this early voting process. So on par with the nation as far as better than expected early voting turnout.
Clerk Brown suggested to county residents that if they have questions, that they can call Election Central or visit in person to get help. The Election Board will meet again on November 4th. During the October 23rd Monroe County Commissioners meeting, Monroe County resident Joe Davis suggested an alternative option for the location of the new jail and justice center at 302 South Walnut Street. Davis repeatedly stepped up to the podium throughout the meeting to speak on the importance of the downtown location until the North Park purchase agreement for the jail was proposed by County Attorney Jeff Cockerell. Commissioner Lee Jones made a point to inform the public that while she wishes everything could come out perfect, she appreciates all of the great support and the people who have helped in moving the project forward.
And I think that we're going to be able to move forward now that we're past really this, I think, probably most difficult decision in the whole process. We're going to be able to move forward and hopefully come up with a jail and a justice campus that the whole community can be proud of. It will be visible. It will be right by I-69. It has easy access to most places in Bloomington, easier access than from downtown to the hospital. And just in many, many ways does actually fulfill what we're looking for. I know there's been concern that no one will want to build someplace where a jail has been built, that will mean it'll be the death of that property or something like that. I absolutely do not agree with that. I think that when that much of the county is moved there, it's going to be next to no time before various services will start locating there to serve those people. I think this will be the catalyst for growth in that area rather than a detriment to it. And as I say, I think this is something that the community will end up being proud of. And I'm proud to have been a part of this decision making. And thank you so much to everyone who has worked on it.
Yeah, great. Couldn't agree more. A lot of great points.
Joe Davis rebutted by explaining his petition, which does not, quote, support the waste of taxpayer funds, unquote. He said that while this project has been delayed, the commissioners are blatantly disregarding the people's wishes.
The public does not want this. The public wants this to be downtown, where it is always served the public best. Our taxpayer objection petitioners, we count. We are a growing number of people who do not support this waste of taxpayer funds. Downtown, the lot is already paid for. The public owns this land. The public wants the Justice Center downtown. Sure, maybe this is the 12th hour, but this is also the most viable location that we will ever have, ever. Where we already have all of our services, already. The people want this, and you are blatantly disregarding the people's wishes. We vested interest who are the experts making their presentations. The public has been excluded. This is the public's money. The public is the decider. The public is the decider.
Chief Deputy Phil Parker said that he is happy that there's finally a decision being made about the location and that the Sheriff's Department is ready to move further into the design process of the facility. Bloomington resident Joe Davis made his dissatisfaction with the Bloomington city government clear multiple times at the Bloomington Board of Public Works meeting on October 22nd. Davis spoke during each public comment period, expressing his opinion that the city is not to be trusted. He claimed that the city stole between $50,000 and $80,000 worth of building materials and tools from his property.
The City of Bloomington Department of Hand came on my sidewalk to my driveway, and they invaded my property and took away probably $50,000 to $80,000
Mr. Davis,
of my personal materials.
The board then discussed contracts for upcoming city projects. During public comment, Davis warned contractors against signing with the city on each contract item, at one point calling the city a bully.
I believe that they should lawyer up before they begin any work, because the City of Bloomington are a bunch of bullies, and they have no respect for due course of law. Thank you.
Public Works Director Adam Wason repeatedly told Davis to limit his remarks to agenda items during public comment. Despite the protests, Davis spoke for at least a minute each time. The next Bloomington Board of Public Works meeting will be November 4th. The Monroe County Council and the Monroe County Commissioners met for a joint work session on Tuesday, October 22nd. The meeting dealt with the proposed sites for the new jail initiative. DLZ project manager Scott Carnegie provided an overview of the potential site of the jail complex on Vernal Pike.
There is no bus route to this site, so just to point that out. There is currently, off of information that's readily available online, there are 2 recorded karst sinkhole features. One happens to be kind of in the center of the site furthest to the east, and there's one recorded furthest to the west. Now, that environmental, I've not seen their report, but they may have located more.
County Councilor Trent Deckard reiterated that the Vernal Pike property is one of 2 locations that county officials are scouting for the purpose of the building of a new jail.
And I would add, if I could, for folks watching at home who are trying to figure out what's going on with this, and you see about 2 headlines every so often and you're trying to figure it out, literally, Mr. Carnegie is talking about Vernal Pike, an option that has been brought up, and the realities at Vernal Pike. And next we'll go into North Park as these sites are discussed. This isn't anybody saying, this is where this is going, how this is going to be. This is the options at that site and the realities of that site. We have also heard from the public on both sides so far, among other sites.
Chief Deputy Phil Parker of the County Sheriff's Office asked how a shift to the Vernal Pike site as opposed to the North Park property would impact the timeline of the new jail project. Carnegie and County Attorney Jeff Cockrell explained where each project stands in determining how feasible the sites would be for a new jail.
One thing from the Sheriff's Office that's of grave importance to us, obviously we've got an estimated cost of delay, which, you know, that's a dollars thing. But one of our concern is the time if we move to the Vernal site and start, looking at that as a viable site. I guess I just put it in as succinct terms as I can. What's the delay factor here as to where we are positioned currently with North Park and where we are positioned with Vernal in terms of when you can start actually moving on the site?
So I'm kind of looking over at Jeff Cockrell.
Yeah.
However, I believe that North Park, we have completed geotech, so that's the soil borings to determine the soil condition and the depth. I'm going to say depth of bedrock because we're in Monroe County. We know there's going to be bedrock, but we now know the depth and the soil composition of North Park. And that environmental, I believe, has completed both phase 1 and phase 2. And I believe out at Vernal Pike, I believe a phase 1 is currently underway. I'm not sure about the status of a geotech.
Jeff's going to answer that.
I think we've gotten the geotech going. We don't have that back. The phase 1 has been returned for Vernal Pike as well. And I expect and Sarah with Vet Environmental is on here, so she can correct me wherever I'm wrong. But we did authorize the waterway and jurisdictional waters report for that site, and I would expect that back in a couple weeks. So we are moving on that. I really wanted to make one slight correction to something Scott said earlier. I had talked to a staff, the engineer for South Central Regional Sewer District, who said they could, and we were just looking at the feasibility of whether that plant could provide it. I've not talked to anybody on the board of South Central Regional Sewer District, I just want to be clear that board has not said yes, but we've talked with their staff to see if it was feasible.
Then the joint session of county officials turned their focus to the North Park property, a site the commissioners approved to purchase during their meeting on October 23rd. While the purchase awaits approval from the county council, the commissioners have previously signaled that this is their preferred location for the Justice Complex. Carnegie outlined the perceived benefits of the North Park site, saying that it's less compact than the Vernal Pike site, leaving more room for growth and expansion.
What I will say about North Park is when you compare the two, this one to Vernal Pike, the site is not nearly as compact as Vernal Pike is. Now, this provides a lot more opportunity for future growth and expansion. And again, as a Monroe County resident, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to speak my piece here at this forum. I personally believe that it's short-sighted to not think about what Monroe County might need 20, 30, 40 years from now. So I spoke my piece. So anyway, that's essentially the layout and configuration. There's water, sewer, electric, all of that right here on this site.
Monroe County Sheriff Ruben Marte expressed his preference for the North Park property due to the opportunity for expansion and for evacuations in the case of an emergency.
One of the things that we think about as well with the location is in case we have to evacuate the jail, it sounds like North Park will give us a space for that just in case it does. What keeps going in my mind is when we had the actual gas leak and we had no place to go. And we were very, very fortunate that the fire marshal didn't tell us to shut it down. So that's crucial as well, that we have the space for expansion. And I know sometimes people look at that the wrong way. However, we need to have the space to evacuate in the case of an emergency that we just can't predict. So I think for that reason, we need the space for that as well.
President and CEO of Vet Environmental Engineering, Sarah Hamidovich, walked through the pros and cons of each site. Hamidovich said that from an environmental perspective, the timeline for the North Park property would be faster.
I think the sheriff had just mentioned timeline, and I think that to kind of comment from my perspective on his point, this week we finally received the final response that we were waiting on from the IDNR and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which completes all of our investigation and basically all investigative activities that we deem necessary for the North Park site. So the North Park site, from my perspective, is shovel ready now. The one caveat for that is that depending on how the design of the property looks, we then need to kind of just have a sit down and make sure that any environmental features that we've identified are not affected by the development, or that we are properly permitted for impacts to those features during the development. But from my perspective, North Park is shovel ready now. Vernal Pike has a lot of work left to do from an environmental standpoint.
While the county commissioners have approved the purchase of the North Park site, it still needs a vote from the county council. The county council meets for its next regular session on November 12th. During public comment at the Monroe County Community School Corporation Board of Trustees meeting on October 22nd, a representative from the Monroe County Education Association, Jenny Noble-Kerchera, spoke to the board, imploring them to ensure that there's enough time for teachers impacted by the Childs Templeton merger to organize their classrooms.
I'm Jenny Noble-Kuchera, president of the Monroe County Education Association, and as such, duly elected to speak on behalf of our teachers. At our last representative council meeting on October 10th, the MCEA representatives voted unanimously to have me speak to you this evening on behalf of our Templeton Childs teachers. I refer to agenda item 8.03. To be crystal clear, we support action at the community and school levels to mend past inequities and strive towards full integration in MCCSC. Furthermore, we want to make clear that we have valued and will continue to every opportunity, conversation, and meeting that we have had with our MCCSC Executive Board to explore, debate, and problem solve the merger plan to the best of everyone's capability. These meetings were born through the discussion bylaw that you passed last spring. In them, we have had positive collaboration regarding programming, staffing, student well-being, and other critical topics for a successful merger. Our objective tonight is to tell you a bit about what happens before a new school year begins, and to implore you to consider our proposed timeline for our students if they are divided between primary and intermediate grades. First, we ask that any and all materials which we will need to pack and have moved, thanks to our building teams, will be ready to unpack by Friday, June 27th. This date is critical because it takes 4 full weeks to have classrooms, libraries sorted by genre and lexile and on shelves, educational games and math manipulatives organized, furniture in place, paper, composition, notebooks, folders, art supplies, iPads, science lab units in place. Childs Templeton teachers will also need to have classroom expectations and learning goals posted, bulletin boards decorated, name tags filled out, materials for support staff ready, materials for International Baccalaureate organized, outdoor garden supplies and playground equipment in place, meet the teacher materials ready, and the first 3 days of school lesson plan. Friday, June 27th is our deadline for all classrooms that need to be remodeled, renovated to fit bigger or smaller bodies, and Lord have mercy, actually built to be ready for teachers and paraprofessionals and students to move into. Please consider our students' academic, social, and transitional needs when you look at the merger proposal tonight, and only approve a timeline that allows our teachers to have those 4 critical weeks to fully prepare for what students deserve. Thank you so much.
The board voted to approve 2 policies, student supervision and welfare, and student attendance and truancy prevention. Board member Cathay Fuentes-Rohr expressed frustration with the new Indiana legislation, which she said reinforces a school-to-prison pipeline.
I'll just say my comment of irritation at the state legislature, which is that we are now required at some point to send a kid an affidavit with a prosecuting attorney if they're habitually truant, and that's pushing us into a school to prison pipeline that we should not have to be in. I mean, kids miss school for all kinds of reasons, and they shouldn't start having a record. So that's my moment of irritation.
School board president April Hennessy agreed and said that she was frustrated with the legislation.
I share that, and I think, I think, especially this board, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been very sort of vocal about our, decision to look at disciplinary disparity and what does that look like and how does it affect our students and who does it affect at what rates. I mean, this is work that we've been doing and now to be sort of legislated by the state to do certain kinds of things that we would frankly not do or we would advise against, I think is, yeah, very frustrating to say the least.
Later in the meeting, Interim Superintendent Dr. Mark A. Winston gave an update on the Childs-Templeton merger. Dr. Winston shared some of the feedback that they've received from parents.
Because we wanted to know what our parents thought about these things and what are the pain points. The question really was centered around what does a family-friendly response look like? So in terms of staffing, while we didn't think they would have a strong thought on that, they actually shared some really insightful pieces of information that we want to be considerate of. The first point that they highlighted for staffing is they wanted to make sure that each school has teachers from both schools so that the students see familiar faces throughout the course of the school day. Current teachers should help create rosters for the students that are moving schools, and teachers should have time to collaborate. So those are the top three. Those are not the only things that they mentioned, but those are the top three items that our families wanted to make sure that we took into consideration and that we reflected upon and figured out how can we address some of those areas. As it relates to transportation, much conversation has been had regarding having walkers take a bus from their zone school to the other school. Families talked a lot about older siblings, walking younger siblings to school, and a pain point of potentially not having that as an option going forward. And one option that they put on the table for our consideration is having our students walk to their zone school or their neighborhood school and potentially catch a bus to go to the other school. They certainly want us to pay attention to the amount of time that our students are on buses. They want us to pay very close attention to school traffic patterns, parking, bus lanes. They want us to minimize drop-offs. To the degree possible, they'd like to see us keep siblings together, and they want us to give consideration to staggered start times for and against. As many people offered one suggestion, we had just as many folks offering an alternate suggestion.
Board member Ashley Pirani said that there were two things that have not been addressed yet that she hopes to see before the merger is completed.
There's a couple of things, though, that I didn't see on here that I did want to pose, and it mostly comes down to making sure that we're also considering that there's some intentional cultural engagements with our schools, things like that, because we do have two virtually segregated schools, and there's going to be a lot of differences. For example, when Dr. Marquet went through and talked about unhoused populations, there aren't any of those students currently at Childs, and there are at Templeton. And that comes with different needs. So that may also require additional training for teachers that haven't had to engage with students in those spaces before. So that was something that I wanted to raise, as well as making sure that when this goes through, whenever it does, that we're checking in at least on a quarterly basis with our schools to find out what's working, what's not, where do we need to make adjustments, what's the 3-year outlook, what's the 5-year outlook, those kinds of things, gathering that metric and not just based on test scores, because as we know, test scores don't look at the whole child, so overall student success.
The MCCSC School Board will meet again on November 19th. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Porman.